Welcome back, everyone, to NFL Nexus. Today we've got a meticulously detailed, comprehensive explainer lined up for you. But before we get into breaking down the tape, the analytics, and the front office maneuvers, I want to explicitly ask you guys to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button on this explainer, and comment below with your thoughts as we go through this. Also, please help support the channel by purchasing our brand new coloring books. I'm telling you, these are absolutely perfect for children, they make a fantastic gift for grandchildren, and yes, they are amazing for adults as well who just want a relaxing way to unwind while supporting independent sports analysis. You can access them right now through the link down in the description, or honestly just scan the QR code you see right there on your screen. So go ahead and pause the explainer and do that now if you can. Alright, let's set the stage for what we're actually looking at today. We are breaking down the anatomy of a draft steal, taking a really close look at the Indianapolis Colts 2026 Fringe Roster Masterclass. We're going to slowly, methodically examine their highly specific Day 3 draft strategy, and then we're going to trace how that perfectly, seamlessly transitions into the high-stakes, incredibly calculated undrafted free agent market. It's a fascinating process, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Colts general manager Chris Ballard sums up the post-draft war room mentality perfectly with this quote. He notes that once the draft ends, it's an absolute frenzy. Now you're recruiting. But the reality of this tracking process, and this is what's so wild about how NFL front offices operate, actually starts way earlier than the final horn. We're talking during the 5th round of the draft. The scouting department is already lining guys up, they're hitting the phones, they're calling agents, they are meticulously watching the draft board, constantly monitoring the dwindling draft pool, and reprioritizing their targets minute by minute. Seriously, imagine the utter chaos of this environment. You're sitting there in the 7th round, you literally have one draft pick left, but there are 15 guys staring back at you on your board who you have exhaustively evaluated as draftable NFL-caliber assets. So what happens? It turns into psychological warfare. The front office is calling a player's representation, while other teams are officially on the clock picking. They're trying to establish that priority relationship in real time, working frantically to convince them to get in their boat, to buy into their culture, even if their name ultimately isn't called on television. It is a highly intense, rapid-fire, almost overwhelming environment. And the entire goal of this mental marathon is securing even just 2 or 3 specific guys for the rookie tryout camp, because finding those right guys can literally alter the depth and the dynamic of your entire 53-man roster.
Section 1. Anchoring the offensive line. The value of Jalen Farmer.
To really understand how the Colts approach the middle rounds, we first have to look at the 114th overall pick in the 4th round, offensive guard Jalen Farmer. When you're picking in the 4th round, you are hunting for highly specific athletic traits combined with substantial, battle-tested collegiate experience. Now, Farmer's collegiate journey is actually super fascinating. He spent time grinding at the University of Florida before ultimately transferring and moving on to the University of Kentucky. And look, starting 24 games in the SEC, that means you have hundreds upon hundreds of high-leverage reps against future NFL defensive tackles. That sheer volume of competitive experience against elite athletes is exactly what NFL scouts obsess over. And that brings us perfectly to this scouting report from NFL insider Field Yates. He calls Farmer a quintessential first guy off the bus type of guard. Now, if you know NFL locker room culture, first guy off the bus is a massive compliment. It implies a physically intimidating, tone-setting presence. Yates notes he brings a genuine mean streak to the field, combined with great size and nimble feet. And let me tell you, nimble feet are absolutely critical for a guard when you're pulling across the formation on run plays or trying to anchor in pass protection against those explosive, speed-rushing defensive tackles we see today. When Farmer engages, he can drive defenders off the ball with total ease. However, and this is key, he's definitely going to need to work on his hands at the NFL level. What I mean by that is his exact hand placement mechanics. He has to get better at shooting his hands inside the defender's shoulder pads, maintaining that leverage, and critically, resetting his grip when an NFL tackle counters. That granular technique is exactly what the Colts' offensive line coaching staff is going to be hyper-focused on refining from day one.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that tiny number, 0.2%. That right there is Jalen Farmer's pressure rate allowed, which happened to be the 5th lowest in the entire FBS. The math here is simply staggering when you really stop to think about it. In 2025, over the course of 416 individual pass-blocking reps, Farmer allowed exactly one single pressure. Just one. I want you to obsess over the incredible consistency required to execute your assignment flawlessly 415 times out of 416 against SEC defensive lines. A single pass-blocking snap requires perfect footwork off the snap, a perfectly balanced base for leverage, and instant microsecond reaction time to stunts and twists. For a 4th-round pick to allow only a single pressure on over 400 pass sets, that drastically, astronomically elevates his draft value.
It totally changes his profile from just being a developmental run-mauling project into a highly reliable, high-upside interior pass protector who can actually provide immediate, high-quality depth for Indianapolis the second he steps on the field.
Section 2, 7th Round Speed Demon, Unpacking Deion Burks. All right, so we're transitioning now from the big guys in the trenches all the way out to the absolute fringes of the draft process. With the 254th overall pick, we are talking near the very end of the 7th round here. The Colts drafted wide receiver Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. Finding elite, legitimate game-breaking speed this late in the draft is incredibly, almost historically rare. Think about it. For a player with Burks' explosive athletic profile to fall all the way down to pick 254 means that all 31 other NFL teams collectively looked at him and decided to pass on him multiple times. So we have to ask why. Here is exactly why Burks fell to the 7th round. There was a massive league-wide disconnect between perception and reality. The expectation, which was heavily driven by some really outdated height biases from scouts, was that because Burks measures in at just under 5'10", he must strictly be pigeonholed as a slot receiver. In the NFL, if you're under 5'10", conventional wisdom has always dictated that you just cannot survive physically on the outside. But the reality of Burks' game is entirely different. If you actually sit down and meticulously study his collegiate tape at both Purdue and Oklahoma, you see his college coaches primarily deployed him on the outside, not hidden in the slot. Because of his raw functional play strength, he outright dominated as an outside Z receiver. He showed a really profound, consistent ability to physically fight through press coverage at the line of scrimmage and make incredible, highly contested plays vertically down the field. The Colts front office brilliantly saw right through the height bias and recognized exactly what his true functional position actually is.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. When you lay out his specific combine metrics like this, passing on him actually becomes mathematically absurd. Let's really break this down. First, look at his vertical jump, 42.5 inches. That wasn't just good, that was the #1 result of any receiver at the entire combine. That means despite his lack of height, his functional catch radius is massive. He can physically elevate and high point the football over defensive backs. Second, his 40-yard dash, a blazing 4.30 seconds, ranking 3rd overall. We are talking about elite defense-breaking, take the top off the coverage speed. Third, the bench press. He was the outright top performer, putting up the most reps of any wide receiver in his class. This directly proves his raw upper body play strength, which is exactly why he can beat that aggressive press coverage on the outside that we just talked about. Finally, his broad jump was the 4th furthest, putting his incredible lower body explosive power on full display. When you aggregate all of that, a #1 vertical, a top 3 40 time, the #1 bench press, and a top 4 broad jump, you mathematically have a premium top-tier athlete. Letting a physical profile like this fall all the way down to the 7th round is quite frankly a front office failure by the rest of the league and an absolute masterstroke by Indianapolis.
So practically speaking, where does Burks actually fit in the Colts' current wide receiver room? We have to analyze this depth chart with real precision. Right now, the Colts have Alec Pierce operating primarily as their X-receiver, which is a role that's definitely going to expand significantly with the departure of Michael Pittman Jr. Then inside, you have Josh Downs, who is the completely entrenched, locked-in starting slot receiver. The coaching staff absolutely wants him on the field as much as humanly possible. So when the offensive coordinator dials up a play that calls for 3 receiver sets, where does a 7th-round rookie like Burks fit into that puzzle? Well, he specifically targets the Z receiver role on the outside. The current established competitors for that outside Z spot are veterans Ashton Dulin and Nick Westbrook-Akine. Now let's be real, it is incredibly highly unusual for a 7th-round rookie to legitimately challenge established NFL veterans for outside offensive snaps. But because of Burks' top-tier strength and speed metrics that we just broke down, he has a skill set that directly translates to that role. He is absolutely going to have a direct, realistic crack at winning that exact rotational Z receiver role in training camp. It's an amazing opportunity.
Section 3. The UDFA Frenzy. Navigating the Undrafted Market. Okay, so the television broadcast ends, the draft is officially over, but honestly, the roster building, it literally just accelerates from there. We are now talking about the undrafted free agent market, the UDFA frenzy. And look, it sounds completely counterintuitive at first glance, right? Because every single college player dreams of hearing their name called on that television stage. But the actual reality of the business of football dictates that going undrafted is sometimes vastly superior to being the 256th or 257th overall pick. Here's why. When you're drafted in those final few slots, you are legally locked into that specific team and a very rigid, non-negotiable rookie contract structure. But the exact second the draft concludes and you go unselected, you essentially hit your very first wave of NFL free agency. The immense leverage completely flips from the team right back to the overlooked player.
This is where it gets crazy. If multiple teams want a specific UDFA, and they usually do, the player's agent gets to spark a full-blown bidding war. They can legally negotiate their signing bonuses to maximize their upfront cash, and critically, they can look at all 32 rosters and personally choose the franchise that offers the absolute best depth chart path to actually making the final 53-man roster. They are literally making a highly calculated strategic business decision about where they want to start their NFL career. And because of this dynamic, they're often earning way more guaranteed money than the guys who were picked right before the draft ended.
Now, to really capitalize on this chaotic UDFA market, Chris Ballard utilizes a very calculated, highly systemic front office strategy. The Colts don't just throw darts at a board and hope for the best. They have established a highly targeted approach where they practically exclusively target fringe players coming out of the nation's top two power conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. And let me assure you, this is not an accident. Ballard's fundamental notion here is that if you are bringing in undrafted players to compete for those brutal final few spots on a 90-man training camp roster, you want players who have already faced the absolute highest level of collegiate competition on a weekly basis. By exclusively targeting the SEC and the Big Ten, you are guaranteeing a baseline level of competitive experience. Think about it. These players have spent the last 3 to 4 years practicing against, taking reps against, and playing in actual games against guys who are already starring in the NFL. They aren't going to be shell-shocked by the speed or the physicality of an NFL training camp because they've basically been in a minor league version of it for years.
I want you to look closely at the physical profiles the Colts prioritized in this phase. I'll read through this slowly so you can see the pattern. First, we have Nolan Rucci, an offensive lineman. Look at those physical dimensions. A towering 6 foot 8 inches tall, 315 pounds, coming out of Penn State in the Big Ten. Second on this list, we have Wes Weeks, a linebacker standing 6 feet 1 inch and weighing a solid 230 pounds, battle-tested down at LSU in the SEC. And third, we have Austin Brown, a safety boasting elite athleticism, hailing from Wisconsin up in the Big Ten. Notice the systemic pattern here? Every single one of these priority post-draft additions matches the exact physical size requirements for their respective positions in the NFL, and every single one of them brings that specific, hardened pedigree of a power conference program. It perfectly sets the stage for how each individual is tailored to fit the Colts' long-term blueprint. So let's focus entirely on offensive lineman Nolan Rucci for a minute. We are looking at a literal mountain of a man with that massive 6'8", 315-pound frame. You just can't teach that kind of size. But his collegiate path wasn't a straight line. It required immense patience. He actually spent 3 largely uneventful years at Wisconsin, where, for whatever reason, he simply couldn't crack the starting rotation. However, instead of just fading away, he made a really pivotal transfer to Penn State, and over his final 2 seasons there, he locked in and made 18 starts in the trenches of the Big Ten. Now, Rucci is universally viewed by scouts as a high-ceiling, long-term developmental project. He's not a finished product. But here is precisely why he matters to Indianapolis right now. The Colts have a noted, significant lack of depth across the offensive line. When you possess a frame that incredibly large, backed by 18 starts of solid Big Ten film, you are the exact type of massive clay that an NFL offensive line coach absolutely wants to get their hands on and mold. That frame alone could realistically result in Rucci finding himself stashed securely on the active roster at some point this season, while they develop his technique.
Next up, we pivot down south to LSU's Wes Weeks. We really need to spend some time dissecting a fascinating dichotomy in his scouting profile. On one hand, the scouting community notes his average athleticism, and they point out some definite inconsistencies in his pass coverage drops and his occasional tackling form. But on the other hand, look at his undeniable, raw statistical production in the incredibly demanding SEC. In his lone full season as a starter, he racked up 74 combined tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. Regardless of what the stopwatch says, he is a highly productive football player when the stadium lights are on. And despite the Colts actually doubling up on the linebacker position during the draft itself, their linebacker room could arguably use even more bodies for depth and special teams. Weeks finds himself in a perfectly ideal situation here. He slots in as a heavy-hitting, highly productive SEC linebacker who could legitimately become a surprise winner of the summer if he can just get on the field and prove that his sheer college production translates way better than his raw athletic combine testing might suggest.
Section 4. The prize of the UDFA class. Austin Brown's fast track to the roster.
Austin Brown's journey is an absolute testament to perseverance. He didn't just walk onto campus and dominate from day one. He endured a really slow, grueling 4-year grind at Wisconsin to finally earn full-time starting duties. But once he finally got that role, he absolutely flourished. As a senior, he started 12 games, culminating in 53 tackles, a tackle for loss, and 3 passes broken up. He brings an ideal, highly sought-after combination of high-end athleticism and incredible special teams upside. Now look at that number on the screen. So the crucial point is $272,000. That is the massive, reported guaranteed signing bonus the Colts gave him just to get him in the building. In the undrafted free agent world, guaranteed money is the absolute ultimate indicator of how a team truly deeply values a player. Giving an undrafted safety over $250,000 in guarantees isn't just taking a flyer to fill out a camp roster. No way. It is a massive institutional investment. When a front office authorizes that much guaranteed cash for a UDFA, it practically guarantees that Brown will get every single possible opportunity, a huge extended amount of reps in practice, and a completely genuine, unobstructed shot at making the final 53-man roster. Simply put, you do not want to cut a player you just handed that much upfront money to.
Let's methodically trace the exact 3 steps required for Brown to actually make the cut, analyzing the Colts' current roster math. Step 1. Dominate on special teams. The Colts underwent some significant coaching and personnel changes on special teams this offseason, and a safety with Brown's specific athletic profile is tailor-made to be an elite gunner and a core 4-phase special teamer. Step 2. Capitalize on the depth chart. Right now, there is decidedly undecided safety depth playing deep behind Cam Bynum. Nobody has a lock on those backup jobs. That ambiguity is a massive, massive window of opportunity for a rookie. Step 3. Prove developmental upside in training camp. If Brown can show the defensive staff that his 4-year grind at Wisconsin actually translates to quick, decisive processing speed in an NFL defense, he mathematically pushes a veteran out of a job and secures his place on the 53-man roster. It is right there for the taking.
Section 5. Final roster impact. Winning on the margins.
Synthesizing this entire explainer, what we see from the Indianapolis Colts here is a literal masterclass in winning on the margins of professional football. Whether it's finding a rugged guard who allowed only a 0.2% pressure rate in the 4th round, mathematically proving a 7th-round receiver's elite physical traits heavily outweigh an archaic hate bias, or strategically utilizing substantial guaranteed money to secure battle-tested power conference talent in the post-draft UDFA market. By systematically combining analytical data, raw physical traits, and the undeniable pedigree of the Big Ten and SEC, Chris Ballard and his scouting staff are consistently able to uncover hidden value where other teams aren't looking. It really proves that the true foundation of a competitive, championship-caliber NFL roster is built deep in the late rounds and in those chaotic hours immediately following the draft. So I leave you with this final provocative question. Which of these late-round steals, Farmer, Burks, Russi, Weeks, or Brown, do you truly believe will make the biggest impact on Sunday? Let's get a real debate going. I want you to comment your thoughts down below right now. And remember, if you enjoyed this incredibly deep dive, please make sure you subscribe to NFL Nexus, hit that like button on this explainer, and definitely don't forget to grab one of our incredible coloring books. They're perfect for kids, perfect for grandkids, and yeah, they are great for adults too. Grab them via the link in the description or by scanning the QR code right there on the screen. Your support is what keeps this channel going. Thanks for learning with me today, and we will absolutely see you on the next deep dive.